Hey everyone, welcome to the first ever podcast of the official Upper Canada College Podcast Club. Today's topic will be about the continuous learning plan being implemented in schools across the country, most notably at UCC itself. Today, in this UCC Podcast Club, we have Jay Liu,
Representing Orr's House.
we have Albert Liu,
Hi, I'm Albert. I'm also from Orr's House.
we have Matt Zhang,
Hello, I'm Matt from Jackson.
we have Stephen Stack,
Hello, I'm Steven Stack. I'm from Scattings.
Joey Katz,
Hi, I'm Joe Katz. I'm from Orrs as well.
Noah Singh,
I'm Noah from Howard.
and I'm Stephen Presetia from the Seaton's House.
All right. So, continuous learning plan. We've been doing online schooling at Upper Canada College since March 25th. It's May 15th now. First of all, how are you guys all doing?
I'm doing quite well, Albert.
Yeah.
Staying inside, social distancing?
Mm.
All right. So, how have you guys felt just in general about the continuous learning plan that's kind of being implemented across a bunch of whole schools and all across the country, really?
It's better than nothing, in my opinion. It's definitely not ideal, but it's better than just not doing anything and not being able to go outside at all. So in that way, I guess it's good, but still it's in terms of, it's definitely not even close to in school, in my opinion.
Yeah. One thing I do think is I think that the college is actually doing an incredible job given the circumstances to make sure that we're still learning content, we're still getting through the curriculum, so we'll be ready for next year. Because I know my two sisters aren't actually in private schools, and they are not receiving the same quality of education that I am here. So I think that considering the circumstances, I think that the school is doing incredibly well.
So do you see a big difference between the two? Do they have the same amount of learning time as us?
Well, what my older sister does is they stream her classes on YouTube, which means that they don't really take questions, they don't really interact with her and her classmates. They just give the lesson, that's it, then they're done. So it's a lot more personal with the teachers here. If I have a question, I could be like, hey, how do you do this? And I feel like it's a much better system that we have going on here than in most schools. So we should be thankful for that.
Sorry, Steven,
Yeah.
Is your sister in university right now? Or
No, one's in grade 12, about to go to university. She's been accepted into a few programs. That's nice. Anyway, I digress. And my younger sister is in grade 8 right now. So, yeah.
I mean, you mentioned that your older sister is doing her classes are being streamed on YouTube right now.
Well, some
And
of them, yeah.
Yeah, compared to what we have at the college right now, which is Zoom meetings where students can participate. I guess there's that kind of difference about how schools go about doing this, because they have their kind of own jurisdiction within their own student body about how they continue to teach students.
Oh, yeah. It's I don't know. I'm not 100% sure what her school is doing. It's just from what I've seen and what she's told me. It's better than nothing.
I think we can all agree that the kind of learning efficiency has dropped a little bit since everything has moved online and we aren't all in the classroom to kind of collaborate with each other. So I was just wondering, do you guys think that it's a good idea to continue education into the summer?
I mean, honestly, with some cases of online class, I feel like sometimes we're actually learning almost the same amount, maybe even more.
Yeah.
I mean, although, yes, we aren't interacting, sometimes I feel like the learning has kept up in terms of content.
Right, that's true.
Yeah.
But the most tough part for me, because of course I am gonna be honest here, I am actually not very good at math. I'm pretty sure everyone knows that. It's been quite a struggle for me to learn throughout the trigonometry course, specifically the subject for trigonometry. It's been the most problem for me, even though in the end I was actually really worried about it, to the point that I started, of course, getting more focused. I gotta I gotta catch up. I gotta make sure that this is done, because of course, if you think about it, we basically only have I don't know, every other day of math class, 40 minutes, 30 minutes, 30 minutes of class, and then that's just a short lecture, right? We don't have a deep explanation to it. Maybe like an example question so that like they can explain like how this works and how certain stuff works. So sometimes the things that's taught in class usually does not reflect the difficulty of the homework, and I can definitely see that throughout the trigonometry course.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually something that's really interesting that I've heard from a bunch of different other students, that like they're saying that because they're at home all day and they're in their own rooms and they have their own time to manage, that their actual homework capability and ability to do assignments on their own time is increasing, and that they're like being more efficient and they're more capable of completing work on time.
Mhm. That actually depends on the person and depends on like what they usually have, right? So maybe for you guys it's actually much simpler because you guys, I mean, as far as really me being a boarding student, right, and me having to move across countries, time zones is one factor, but the other one is of course the environment, right? Since we at boarding usually we live on campus, right? It's still, we, even though like, oh yes, this is our home, this dorm is our home, but we still have that like that UCC school buildings kind of like environment, right? We're still basically technically in school, and so our kind of like our mindset is much more focused, much better. I don't know if other boarders experience this, but especially for me, I'm actually having much more difficult time to actually do works because I'm basically around my family, and the only times I've ever been here is either during March break or during winter break. That's it. I've never done work in here, and of course before previously it's different. I went here 8th grade Saudi, but right, that's the problem, right? Because that environment change is actually pretty important to someone's mindset. So I think that's just different people experience different things. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I think this
I mean,
whole
yeah.
thing is just leading towards and alluding to one single point in online school that is very emphasized right now, which is independent work. It seems like independent work is everything that online school is trying to not only teach, but it has to be independent for it to be for online school specifically, because when you don't have that face-to-face interaction as easily because everyone's talking online, it's hard to communicate. It creates a sort of sense of independence and not really like breaking off of other people, but you feel like more alone when you're working, which can either be beneficial for some or others. So personally, I feel like when I'm in school, I have more interactions with people. So I find I procrastinate more during school, like actual in building school. But now that I'm at home, I find that since I'm working alone and I'm getting used to working by myself, it feels like I'm getting more productive because I'm not quote unquote relying on other people, or like I'm not seeking help immediately from other people. So it seems like I'm working more efficiently at home because I'm thinking more about myself because there's no one else here.
For long-term projects, I find that I struggle with procrastinating, but with short-term ones, like maybe just homework, the teacher sets like very specific due dates, and it's really, easy just to like focus for an hour, just get it done, or else you're going to be in trouble, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. I mean, then again, that in of itself is also hard because you're like, oh, it's only an hour. I can do this, anytime. So you like go into like playing video games or like doing other things, going for a walk or something, even exercising. But then when you come back, you're like, oh, I only have this much time left in the day. And you just realize that you pretty much like wasted the entire day when you could have like been finished all your work in one day. But it feels like, oh, it's so easy, so I just don't do it. And you do other stuff and you pretty much never get around to actually doing it.
I guess on the topic of grading, I mean, for those who don't know, our school has implemented a policy in which any assessments that we do during the school year online won't count toward, if it's below your mark in that course already, it won't count towards your final grade. I mean, I guess I'm just begging to ask the question, do you guys think that there's a correct way for schools to kind of implement grading policies during this time?
I mean, for under grade, like maybe grade 11, 12, it matters a lot to implement this policy because it affects our uni. But for us, I think it definitely should impact whether it's, worse than our normal mark or not. Because, our marks don't directly impact our future. So I think it's important to, give us some pressure to work harder, right? Or else people are just going to be slacking off in their, better subjects.
Yeah.
I mean,
Whilst
Jay,
I
that's
can
not necessarily true. because like some universities, especially in the U.S., they look at your marks starting from grade 9. So I think grade 10 marks still have a tangible effect on the teacher.
Yeah.
And like I know, I think it's still like I know. I guess like yeah, students shouldn't be slacking off. But then again, you can't punish people for like having a change of environment and not necessarily adapting to it as well as other people have.
Yeah, that's actually true. Yeah. And like the one thing that I want to add about that grading thing is that different stuff that affects different people differently, because of course, as we see, for the students that is excelling in the grade, yes, this is definitely like such a demotivator, because it's like, oh, I got a all around 6. I mean, I can definitely try to improve it to like at a 7, but then like that's a lot of work. Getting an 8 is really difficult, everyone knows that. So it's like they usually just say, why should I work? I already got an overall 6, probably gonna make it, I don't know, good. And so they just don't work. But then for some people, they're actually like, of course, they have problems in grading. They have like an overall or a 5 or a 4, some even a 3. Those people actually, it kind of encourages them on the fact that, oh yes, my grades are not going to decrease anymore, but now is the time for me to put more effort in so that I can make sure I can fix the mistakes I did, making it into a better grade for the end of the year.
I feel like if you were slacking off before, you're not going to improve, like especially when you're given more freedom, right? Like if you can't work during the school year, you're not going to be able to work when you have infinite amount more of free time, right?
Yeah, I think this is all, this is kind of related to something else. It's now I feel like it's a common theme is like we're in isolation, you have all of this free, quote unquote, free time if you're not working or whatever. And there's a constant theme that keeps on popping up of like self-improvement or whatever. Like my parents keep on telling me, oh, you have all this time, why don't you do some workouts to make yourself more fit? You have all this time, why don't you improve your grades because you have all of this time to work? And it seems like people are thinking about this as like a self-improvement time.
The fact that we have more free time encourages, sometimes there's only so much excitement in looking through the internet for like 10 hours straight. 10, like in my opinion, 10 hours is like my max before then just I should really do something different. Yeah, it's in my opinion. 10 hours is like, that's the cap. More than that, and I'm starting to feel, by the end of the day, I would feel really unproductive, like crazy. I would feel terrible. And since now we have more time, we can learn new skill. That's what most people are doing right now. We're exercising, get ourselves more fit. But then again, it all depends on the motivation of the person, really, and the situation with the quarantine. Like, what are the rules? Is there some rules you're breaking if you're going outside? And like, yeah.
Steven, could you remind us like where you are right now and what like, the situation is like there?
All right. So I'm now in Saudi Arabia. It's a country. It's a monarchy. Of course, if you don't know that, well, now you know. It's a monarchy it's led by a family. So the king, basically, or just the king in general, just with his advisors, probably will make the decisions on like what rules to implicate and what rules to like, and of course the severity of the rules. Right. So right now, curfew is lifted. A few days ago it wasn't. It was 24-hour quarantine, so no one can get out except for the reasons of grocery shopping, and that also requires an appointment to even go to the grocery shop, and work. Anything other than those two, you either have a risk of a fine for, I think, around $3,000 or 20-day jail time. And that can get more severe, and it now changes completely, and it gets actually much more severe. That said, if workers don't even is still in their workplace after curfew, they'll be fined around $13,000.
I think that brings up the argument of like, should you enforce these rules or implement these very strict rules to keep everyone in place and keep everyone in their houses for the betterment of the people? But then at the same time, there's the side of like, staying inside is bad for you, and like people want to get outside and grocery shopping and all that stuff.
So I think it's important to definitely have these social distancing things in place to protect the general population, but there's definitely a limit, and it kind of promotes this culture of reporting certain people, like just for for being more irresponsible, because not everyone holds the same importance of the social distancing together. So, for example, like people have been like arrested in the U.S. specifically just for like playing in the park with their children or whatever. So like it definitely, in my opinion, I think it's important to have limitations on where you can go, and definitely these like larger things like going to the beach and such should definitely not be protected, especially if they're like close together. But there's definitely some like things that are too extreme for like for like something that should be to protect people. You know, that's just my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, there's already been like a lot of protests in like the Western, like a lot of protests in a lot of states in U.S. and some parts in Canada, because people are running out of money and the government, funds are not, providing them enough to support their families. So I think if we just enforce something like this, people are gonna be very, against it, and especially in the U.S. where they have like not a culture, but like where they don't have the best relationships with the police, they might, see this as kind of like tyrannical, or however you might put it.
I think this is like really about tipping the scale. Like there's different ways to approach it, but it's mostly like one or the other. You can either do it more authoritarian like and have the government take more control of societal norms so that they can manage and control the spread of the virus. And there's another way where like you're a little bit more lenient and the government doesn't have as much control, but people still have like the freedom to do what they want and complain less, and it kind of maintains the government's image that way. Do you think that like the middle of this scale is the best way, or do you think that it's like there is a correct way at all in this situation?
So, well, I think definitely the middle of the scale. What I was going to say earlier, which definitely ties into this, is the trick is finding a balance. You need to find a balance between preventing the spread and growth of the virus in the country. And on the other hand, you want to have as little of an impact on the economy and on the general well-being of the people as you can. So the trick is finding a balance between these two. So we should strive to see people work from home. We should strive to see students receive a virtual education. We should try to limit the spread of the virus while at the same time not being too destructive to just in general. So that's the way I see it.
I guess there would be people that could argue that like there are many countries such as China, for all we know, North Korea, they're very authoritarian governments. They're taking a lot of control of the situation. And for the most part, it seems like from the information that they're reporting, they're dealing with the virus very well. There's a lot of different other countries that acted very early. Some countries didn't have any cases whatsoever, and they sent citizens into quarantine, which did receive complaints, but now those countries are also doing very well. So what do you guys think about the situation there?
I mean, personally, I think that like the middle ground doesn't work, because like no matter what, even if you're quarantining them a little or you're quarantining them a lot, people are still going to complain. And honestly, it's just a debate versus like your rights and liberty versus like public safety. Personally, I think public safety is more important. And I don't know, I think that like I'd rather be safe in quarantine than like I know being able to go wherever I want, but I have risk. Although I do understand, like, yeah, some people don't have enough money. Those situations are understandable and different, but not the same when you're like you're perfectly comfortable, but you have to like go to the beach because you want to, and then your family ends up getting sick.
Yeah, I think in a way it should be more freedom. The freedom to appease the people, like Albert said, to add some stability to the government, because at the end of the day, it's not an authoritarian regime like North Korea. So we won't be able to add like complete, like you can't even leave your house or you'll be arrested on site. We probably could, but that would definitely like the culture in the US is definitely one that's anti-government, just based on how the country was founded. So if you start arresting people just for like getting their own food, it'll definitely like destabilize the government, and that's just not a good idea. So yeah, and also the balance, considering how vast these countries are, how you can either be in a bachelor apartment or in like $100 million home, where how you live in isolation can vary a lot. It's just good to have a balance, like right down the middle.
This is kind of related, but in South Korea, I think you guys probably know about this, but in South Korea, they had a whole system implemented like England, but I'm not sure if that's being used, where they had a whole security system of cameras and stuff where they can track everyone's movement. They made the entire country download an app or like send out notifications when you're in the area of seeing someone with the virus or something. And in South Korea, at first there was a massive amount of cases, but they flattened their curve exponentially. Like it flattened immediately after they implemented the system. And some argue that doing this is kind of like infringing on people's rights of privacy. And some people are saying, and the government claims that it's for the betterment of the people because of their personal health and safety. And yeah, I just wanted to hear your opinions or something.
It's always this debate about, do we let the government infringe on our freedoms in exchange for safety? Like, just with like terrorism not that many years ago, it was the same debate. And I think like with most things, it is in the middle, because it won't be like an enjoyable life to have government agents or whatever always looking at what you're doing. It'll just make you feel paranoid, right? But then you also, to some extent, the government can't allow you to infringe on similar other people's rights. So that's where I stand on this.
It's the safety of the people here. Your privacy shouldn't, it should matter to a certain degree, but shouldn't really be the big thing here, because everyone's lives is in danger at this point, right? Once you hit it, there's like people say that's like your lungs will be permanently damaged. Like things that like old people is definitely very vulnerable, and it can just it makes them very, very vulnerable to this disease.
I mean, can you be granted your privacy back after this epidemic if the government has all your information? Like, will you even have a private life anymore?
Right.
Yeah, that's the main concern.
It just adds like this ability for the government to just do that right after.
Yeah.
And then everyone's already used to it, so they can be like, oh yeah, during the virus, you guys did this, it kept you safe, so why not do it for just regular law enforcement?
Yeah, that's very similar to in London and in the UK. They have a camera system set up all over the country. I forget what the system is called, but they have cameras on almost every street, and they can monitor all of the people. And it's supposed to be the intention was that it was supposed to prevent crime so that they can prevent terrorist attacks, stuff like that. And some people side with privacy, some people side with the program because they think that it benefits the people. Yeah, I think that's just the main problem with the system, is that people think that it's a slippery slope. If it's owned by a privatized company, they can sell data to third-party groups. They can sell it to people that the government doesn't want to have, that the population or the people don't want to have released their own personal information. So that's a concern. But yeah. Also, moving on from that topic, because I think we've covered that quite a bit. What do you guys think? It seems like people are constantly wanting to buy masks, and like it seems now that governments are saying that people need masks to when going into stores and stuff. Do you guys think that that's a good idea? Do you think that people should use their own masks? Because there's safety in place for the population, but then there's also the medical workers and all that stuff. Like there was a recent headline on the newspaper in Western Hospital. They just had a massive outbreak of a large chunk of their hospital just got sick because of one or two people that had the virus walking around, and the doctors didn't have the proper amount of protective equipment because of a bunch of different problems. So what do you guys think about that with like the mask culture and like with the people?
It was actually very interesting. My mom told me a story about a friend that she knew that was working in a hospital, and she was like a frontline worker, but she wasn't in ER. So she was allowed to wear like N95 masks, which are like higher quality, but the actual patients, like they were prioritized for masks in ER, and the doctors weren't allowed to wear N95 masks because the concern was that many of the doctors don't need the masks because masks are largely to prevent other people from getting the virus from you. So they prioritize those type of masks for patients.
I mean, yeah, that's a possibility. Like another thing that people commonly talk about is when using masks in public is masks often can even cause you to get the virus even more, because if you don't have it and you are touching things but then you adjust your mask, it's like people think it's a safety net. So once they have their mask on, then they're not afraid to touch things, and then when they're adjusting their mask, then they get themselves sick. So it's like a safety net, and people think that it's like a false sense of security.
Well, I guess we can end today's podcast there. Thank you all for listening, and we will catch you guys in the indefinite future.
Thank you, Steven.